Method EU has looked invincible so far today. They have been on a tear through the lower bracket. Abracadabra needs to come up with a big answer right now. Before we get this one started, BlizzCon, let me hear you make some noise for two of the top dogs.
Method EU squaring off. They're 1-up right now against Abracadabra. Both teams picking and fighting their way through the sewers right now. CG Boralus is getting into it, and Abracadabra facing eliminations. Ironic, and this is going to be a very cool one to see as both of them are getting into the first boss's room and grabbing a whole heap of mobs with them.
Gingy went way ahead of the group. I was expecting to see him set up some pull here, but it looks like it really didn't do much. They're just getting ready to set up to channel their trinkets and go into this massive pull. This is the same pull we saw them do earlier today. They were able to pull it off with no hitches, and there's two Emissary of the Tides in here. They can't interrupt anything here. They just need to make sure they AoE down everything before it can hurt them.
That's right, and they dive right in. I mean, Mears instantly pops his Touch of Karma and just dives in head first into all these mobs. So with the Tides Emissary up right now, of course, if two of them out there, you're not going to be able to drop any big AoE stuns. It's just all on the healers to be able to heal it up, and they didn't get it to save Divine Fields. Mock going down as well. Bloodlust had just gotten started as this pull is ending in disaster for Abracadabra.
These guys are horde in this dungeon. They can't Shadow Meld the trash off and res up. They have to. I mean, only the rogues can vanish, so Zmok has to instantly release, stealth back to the group to get a res off, and it's going to cost them a ton of time. They committed their Bloodlust to that pull too.
Really did. I mean, that's just absolute disaster level, and it cost them so much, especially since Divine cannot come back. He cannot walk back, so they need to have Zmok stealth ahead, res Divine Field, get back, and try to be able to do this pull all over again. But their momentum, that mentality is just so painful for them. And right now, Divine, I think he legit did release, so they're going to have some problems here unless he suddenly got ahead of them.
I mean, at this point, you know, they had a zero-death dungeon in Waycrest Manor, and they still lost the dungeon. You have to kind of wonder where their mentality is going to be at when they wipe on the first pull of the dungeon, and you know Method EU has had a super clean run of this dungeon, and they're not going to make any mistakes. I mean, you have to wonder where their head is right now.
Absolutely, you do. And I mean, now they're just going back, and their routing has been completely scuffed. They're going right back to the start of the dungeon. They have to be able to kill all these mobs, which they never plan on doing, so their routing is already in trouble. They have to figure out where they're making up extra percentage left and right, and this is just what you do not want to see when a team is facing elimination.
But at the same time, and we've talked about this for Method EU a lot this entire tournament, even if you make a mistake right now, even if you have a full team wipe like this, the dungeon isn't over. The other team has the entire dungeon left to make some mistake to let you back in the dungeon. They just have to keep going and have an opportunity here.
I mean, you're against Method EU. They made a mistake.
True.
They made a mistake last game, and they still were able to pull out a victory just to poor optimization of some of the routes onto that one. So at that point, what do you have left at your disposal?
I mean, you have to just push forward and deal with what's in front of you. You can't give up in the lower finals of BlizzCon, man. You have to keep going to try to get into those grand finals. I mean, this is as big as it gets, really.
Yeah, and it just goes to show how tight the competition can be and how strong some of these teams can be. And looking at, you know, what they're going to be able to pull together. And this is an especially dangerous pull since you have to be able to deal with that Iron Tide Raider. He has that Savage Tempest out, and that is incredibly nasty alongside the hook. So they really want to be able to focus that mob down as quickly as you can.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw some interesting pathing from Method EU earlier today where they pulled trash packs that we normally don't see most team pulls. And they actually decided to skip some of the spotter trash that we usually see teams pull as well. And honestly, it looked great. Zero deaths, they skipped one of the harder parts of the dungeon. And even though it looked questionable based off of what we've seen all season long, the fact of the matter is, usually these teams will come up with better strategies. They'll hold them in their back pocket for a big land like this. And it's great to see them have something just fresh and new prepared for this map.
That's right. Zaylee, of course, getting a couple Sunfires, Moonfires off on it to some of those gutters to the right of them. That way they're going to be able to get that additional trash percentage wrapped up. And of course, they have to be able to run it through this little quick gauntlet here, take down any of those powder shots, and get themselves ready with their first spotter.
Yeah, and I mean, once again, this is where the dungeon really begins. The first boss, that trash, I mean, even though they make it as difficult as possible with the massive pull that they do, this is where the dungeon begins. How well you're able to deal with that spotter. Every single time that spotted artillery goes on one of your players, you need to make sure that you're placing those circles in the right direction, because honestly, that circle probably does about 75% of your overall damage in this dungeon, making sure you deal with a lot of mobs. But the problem is the affixes. When all these explosives are spawning at the same time, you have to make sure that you're focusing all of them down, and we saw pretty much the worst case scenario just now. 4 explosives spawn, no problem for Method EU.
That's right. I mean, you even saw the pistol shot as well. It didn't quite crit, so it was like a 1% explosive that he had to run over and kill. He still did it, but it just goes to show how prepared you have to be and how you have to know your assignments to get ready for this.
I mean, these guys seem unfazed. I mean, usually in that scenario where you're kind of like, oh man, explosives help, and I mean, they were able to get it done perfectly. And this is one of those pulls we're talking about. We almost always see this pull skipped. We see, you know, your tank will hop on top of the druid's back and they'll hop across to the bridge and it'll look really cool. Maybe they'll commit some shrouds to it. But no, they just deal with this trash back, even though it has a commander in it, which is something you usually see teams try to avoid because the spotter does no damage to it. They're just going to go ahead and cleave this back down.
So, I don't have to worry about it, and it kind of goes to show how well they're going to be able to do this, and the benefits, for example, of being able to start skipping some of the other mobs ahead. We've seen, for example, how they were able to skip around that Void Emissary as they approach Hadal's alley, and how well they're able to just continue optimizing their routes. They're not having to split their spotter routes as we were seeing previously, where they'd kill Lockwood, keep the spotter alive, do one pull with that spotter, then kill it, then start skipping ahead. They started optimizing it even further by making sure they were grabbing all these mobs, going directly to the boss.
And of course, even though you have this massive AoE pull on top of the boss, the name of the game here, make sure you focus down the boss as much as possible and let the spotter deal with everything else. This boss is phased very tightly. Every single time he gets 100 energy, as you can see on the boss's health bar at the bottom there, they're going to try to let it hop up to the bridge, but you can see the perfect execution. If you ring a piece of the boss and knock her back, she can't disengage to the bridge. That's perfect.
It was great, and they also added Ursul's Vortex to the equation on top of it. So it first knocked her out and then dragged her back into the ring of peace, continued knocking her into the air so that they're able to get an extra 5-10% damage onto it. You love to see this level of optimization from a team like this.
And I mean, really, those Ring of Peace plays are going to, you know, save them an extra phase on the boss. They'll be able to face this boss one whole intermission sooner, which saves you a large amount of time, something like 30 to 40 seconds, which, you know, when you're this far ahead may not seem like a big deal, but when they don't know they're this far ahead. They can't see where the other team is, so they have to really play to the best of their ability with everything they have, and these guys are doing it.
I think that in many ways they kind of have that internal clock. They start comparing to some other times that you might have seen previously in the future, and they start saying, okay, I know if we play this, if we're executing properly, we're following the usual sort of timings for killing the boss around 3 minutes early or something like that. Killing Lockwood, I'd probably learn 8.5, something along those lines. That will be much more ahead of other teams, and I think that they're continuing to prove it to themselves when they execute properly.
And we'll see just here, like, I mean, I remember in their first run of the day, they had Captain Lockwood down to like 44%. They got an extra 5% from that Ring of Peace Ursul's combo. And yeah, once again, 43% on the boss. And they were able to phase the boss from 42% to 0 here last time. So I'm assuming they're going to get it again. Just have to deal with this one final intermission phase, and they'll be on to the rest of the dungeon. I mean, Method EU are just trucking through this dungeon right now. We see Abracadabra has finally gotten the first boss down, and they're onto that first spotter of the dungeon, but really, they're just kind of hoping for something to happen to Method EU here.
That's what you really have to do when you're facing up against these guys. I like that they ended up killing off that spotter early, since they're at 42%. They're getting their latent Arcana trinkets prepared and prepped as Lockwood comes right back down with that shot going towards her, and then they are going to be working to burn her down and guarantee that she does not see another phase.
It's important to mention here too, just small optimizations like leaving the deckhands alive throughout that phase so that the rogues can get a little bit of extra damage from their Azerite traits, just helps them make sure that they phase this boss all the way to 0. It's going to be a little bit closer this time than it was last time, but they should be able to get the boss dead before that yellow energy bar at the bottom fills up, and then we'll move on to the final important section of the dungeon, Hadal's Alley, like we mentioned.
That's right. I mean, if they don't have it, it's going to be a little close here, but they do have Ring of Peace. They have Ursul's Vortex at their disposal, so it shouldn't be a problem at all. Right as she reached 100 energy, they get the kill onto it. Method EU's going strong throughout.
And I mean, this is usually the part of the dungeon we see teams start to use the spotter. I mean, usually we'll see teams something at like 40% trash here, and they'll deal with the spotter through this entire section of the dungeon. They'll leave the spotter alive through Red Captain Lockwood. Method EU, they skip almost all of this trash that we normally see killed by the spotter. This is due to them actually pulling more trash at the start of the dungeon, and they just go straight to the alley that we keep talking about. This is going to be their first massive spotter pull of, I believe, 3 that they plan on doing.
That's right, they're grabbing all those mobs around the Void Emissary, they're grabbing all of the powder shots as well, instantly getting the spotters damage, but it's going to take some time to be able to grab all of them in together. So you're looking to have the tank, or you're looking to have somebody getting targeted by this, or one of the DPS in particular, getting targeted by the spotter, rounding everything up, and this instant damage from all the shots going out from all of them puts tons of stress on the healers. You're going to see all the defensives coming up soon.
And really the only super dangerous part here is making sure your tank doesn't go down, making sure you don't get overrun by explosives. As long as those spotter circles are on top of the entire group, you're going to be 100% fine. But we see Frag dropping incredibly low. He still has the cheat death available, so he still has that available. Not going to go down just yet, and he's able to be healed up by Xaylia. But I mean, this is perfect execution of the spotter by them, and they're even managing to get the Demolisher down to half HP too. Just perfect target execution from Method EU.
That's right, they did an incredibly good job on that one, spacing out the defenses when they needed it to make sure they're staying alive. Like, whenever I look at Mir's cooldowns, I'm always seeing Touch of Karma getting used on cooldown. I'm always seeing whether he's running with Dampen Harm, popping any of these defense, or sorry, Fort Brew as well, sorry. Always having these defenses coming up when he needs them, timing them at the right moments, just to make sure that he's able to survive these crucial moments right now, and it's so strong. Oh! Looks like he did end up taking one of the circles on that, or it might have gotten meleeed by those emissaries, the Tides, but he's in a safe position right now as they're starting to stabilize and make sure that the last of these mobs getting taken down. I think they just have the other half of Hadal's room, and they're going to do that in probably like 2 pulls.
Yeah, a little bit scary there. They let the Emissary of the Tides out from the Paralyzed and Root CC that they use. Usually Mirrors will taunt it out to the side. They'll CC it there and make sure it doesn't come into the group. But it looks like it did get a melee off on him there. But he didn't use the Karma like you were just mentioning. He knew he was fine somehow. I mean, that was fantastic heads-up play to not use it and make sure that he was totally fine, you know, even without using personal cooldowns. But that was definitely a scary moment for them, and it definitely is slowing their setup for what we see them do here. We know, based off of their pull earlier today, they're going to pull the rest of the trash in with Hadal, and they're going to cleave it all down. And this is a nasty pull. They even commit their bloodlust to it.
It's very nasty indeed. You're seeing Touch Karma going right up onto the boss right now, so they're expecting all that huge damage to be rolling out of the group. And again, they have that double sap going off for some of those powder shots off in the corner. They're going to pull it in later, but Shinji does go down. Have Battle Res left available for him, but he does lose the bloodlust buff. That is going to hurt them just a bit. They have to watch out for that stacking poison debuff going up onto now right here as the tidal wave is coming through.
Yeah, he did have one of those poison debuffs on him from the Invader as well, so a lot of damage going out on him. They did have the Battle Res available, and they do have one more available should they need it as well, so they're sitting pretty right now on this boss. With the trash going down, all they have left to deal with is the Commander and those charges, and really at that point, it's just a big single target chunk of health, and there's not really a whole lot that can go wrong on that.
Yeah, meanwhile, Abracadabra, I mean, not to forget onto them, they're 14% left on Dread Captain Lockwood, and goes to show they're still just quite a bit behind as Method EU's had almost all of their trash done. They have a couple mobs left remaining that they'll be able to take down, and then they're going to be going on to the final boss.
And this is just, like we mentioned earlier as well, in their first run of Siege of Boralus, this is just perfecting their execution, making sure they're always doing the best thing they can do to get the most single target damage out of their classes. Leaving these snipers up, number one, for the first day we pull, it gets rid of a lot of the random damage that goes on in the group, and also leaving them to this section of the dungeon, it lets your rogues get a little bit of extra wits about you on single target. They can get a little bit of extra chance to get those double strikes on their single target, do a little bit more damage, and it's just safer in general. So these guys just have an absolute perfect strat in this dungeon.
That's right, and just being able to have that strong execution. Like, look at it. They hit the Ring of Peace to be able to knock it out, then they run into the Typhoon, and they're constantly just knocking these snipers into an ideal position, making sure that they're getting stunned as often as they possibly can, shutting down any extra damage that Xaylia can keep on pumping when he needs to.
And I mean, seriously, at this point, you kind of have to look forward to what seems inevitable at this point, a grand final between Method EU and Method NA. If I'm Method NA in the back right now, and I'm seeing the form that Method EU has been in the entire day, 3 straight 2-0s for them, I mean, you gotta be wondering, what can we do? How can we improve our game in order to take these guys down? Because they look unstoppable right now.
I don't think Method NA wants any other final than Method EU.
To be honest, I don't think they do either.
You know, I think when they beat them at Sydneyland, they said, okay, we beat them. We want to be able to show that we can continue to beat them no matter how they're playing, whether it's a good day for them, whether it's a bad day for them. We want to be able to show them we're the best. And Method EU on the other side, they said, we're the best on that one.
And Abracadabra, I mean, they're still trucking through the dungeon, but at this point, with the way Method EU is playing, they're just not going to go down. These guys are absolute machines, and Abracadabra, you just kind of have to wonder where things went wrong for them. I mean, they wiped for the first pull, and they had a couple of mistakes there, but you know, I think the thing with them is we mentioned it so many times in our discussion with us here. They just kind of have that on and off mentality, and unfortunately, it just looks like they were off today.
Yeah, we talk about their on and off mentality quite a bit, but I also want to talk about their practice level, their commitment level. You know, these are guys that don't give up. We've seen times with a lot of well-known players in either NA or EU communities for Mythic Plus putting together their own teams, competing in the MDI, and then things just kind of fall apart for them. Abracadabra has had such resilience through failure, through success, that they are just one of these teams we're always going to be seeing, that we're always going to be looking at as top-level players, no matter what. So Method EU quite a bit ahead, about to start the final boss, as Abracadabra still clearing out Hadal's room, but Method EU is getting themselves ready to be able to take this game and the series.
And of course, standing between them and a free ticket to the grand finals, Method EU just has to deal with Vitgoth, the final boss of Siege of Boralus. And we did see a tiny hiccup from them earlier today on this boss, where on the second platform they didn't quite have enough damage to kill off that second gripping terror, and they ended up spawning a third demolishing terror. Fortunately for them, they spawned right next to each other, so they were able to have now tank both of them. But if that happens again and they don't get the good spawns that they got, then we could see some problems happen here.
I mean, right here we got double demolishing terrors as well, 81 and 95% onto them, but they're still committing and they're still focusing on that gripping terror to be able to bring it down. Gingy, of course, has popped his riposte. He's switching off. They're trading off with Frag. That way they're going to be able to just kind of redirect some of that aggro, as now is just tanking his demolishing off in the corner, and the rest of the guys are trading off aggro there, trading off riposts to make sure they bring it down.
And I mean, honestly, that's the best way to deal with it. The only problem I'm seeing is they don't have riposte available for the second platform, which is where they had problems last time. And we saw them commit their trinkets to this. They use those late hard hand, those Ishara's Fauna Power here. So if they don't have those available for the second platform, I don't see how they're going to get it again. But of course, the main thing here, they're going to make sure they focus down this first demolishing terror, and then they're going to engage the gripping so that they have the best chance to not get the third demolishing terror.
That's right, and it's always based off of when the gripping terror gets in combat with the group. So right as they go onto that second platform, the gripping terror is present, but unless you engage in combat, it won't start that timer for the demolishing. So they make sure they kill that first demolishing, engage with the gripping, get as much damage onto it, and like you said, they're going to need to get very lucky or have to be very careful if they want to continue to commit to the gripping terror when the first demolishing spawns and when the second is. But they have so much damage. The gripping terror is at 20%.
I mean, they're killing it so much faster than they did earlier today. These guys absolutely destroyed that gripping terror. They didn't even come close to getting the third demolishing. All they have to do is single target this down, and they're onto the last platform.
That's right there, and it goes to show, I mean, how they're probably readjusting some of their cooldowns depending on what's present to them. You might say, all right, well, if we're able to use cooldowns on the first one, we commit to that, and then we're going to be able to have cooldowns at the very end, commit to that one as well, and then seal this victory and get on to that grand finals.
And of course, there's full committing on this final platform, as that first demolishing terror that spawns has about triple the health of any other demolishing terror on this fight. So you're going to see these guys go straight for the gripping terror on that back side of the boat. And you see Mira's popping the touch of death, everything coming out from all their DPS players in order to beat the second demolishing terror spawn. And I mean, Method EU has looked fantastic in this dungeon.
They have been fantastic in this dungeon, fantastic in this series. 40% left onto the gripping terror to free the engineer, fix the cannon, and take down Vitgoth. Another demolishing has spawned, but they do both have the riposts back. I'd look to one of them to get into melee right now before some of those slams start coming out. I love what we're seeing here. They waited for the initial slam, put out a pistol shot onto it. Oh, it does end up slamming, even though Gingy was in melee onto that one.
But they have all their personals available. They're totally fine. The gripping terror is dead, and when that cannon comes up, we're going to see them going through.
So I gotta watch out for now. He's dropping very low. They get the Dispel off onto him. Zalia was casting Trank. There's double demolishing onto now. They even put the Crucible of Flame into him to add a little bit of extra loving. Vitgoth is about to fall. There we go. Second shot's the charm. Method EU taking a 2-0 victory over Abracadabra and sealing their way in the grand final.